Patrik is principal of Zaha Hadid Architects. He joined Zaha Hadid in 1988 and was seminal in developing Zaha Hadid Architects to become a 500-strong global architecture and design brand. Patrik Schumacher studied philosophy, mathematics, and architecture in Bonn, Stuttgart, and London. In 1996, he founded the Design Research Laboratory, DRL, at the Architectural Association in London, and he continues to teach. He's promoting parametricism as a new epochal style for the 21st century. Recently, he has promoted the Metaverse as a key arena for innovative architectural design. And the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Patrik.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, we'll show some studies about the Metaverse. We actually have launched a Metaverse called METROTOPIA that will be the core of my presentation. And yeah, parametricism is also relevant to the Metaverse, and I expect and I can see already that Metaverse design has more time and sensibility for parametricism than maybe the physical world at this point. And I think that parametricism will be helped along by the flourishing of the Metaverse, which I also convinced will happening when we start making it happen. So let me share my screen. And I will kick off. Okay, I hope that can be seen.
Yes, we can see it.
Great, yeah. So I won't talk much about storytelling, nor am I focusing on the environment. I just present the concept of the metaverse, but also how we've been working on this in the last few years. This was triggered by obviously by the COVID pandemic and many new startup companies having to shift into the digital realm. And I was already into the metaverse in the early 90s, the beginning of the internet, when a lot of people thought that the internet might be that kind of more real-time or spatial interface rather than a graphic interface based on magazines. So I mean, so one thesis is that the metaverse will take over a large part of the internet. And that could only be for the better. It will be a big further productivity boost like the internet, because it will make the internet much more intuitively accessible, browsable, and much more real time. So the metaverse or cyberspace is the immersive internet. So you get this focus on real-time communicative interaction, the interface expansion, where you have a 360-degree layered and dynamic interface to really browse when things come together in virtual cities, which I will talk about. So this browsing navigation, where you just have to kind of go to destinations you know, or type in or rely on preconceived hyperlinks, you can have really intuitively explore the internet like a city. And it's going to be quite interaction rich, because wherever you look and see, you can probably do things, engage with other people. It's a multiplayer environment. So the technology, of course, for that was developed in the gaming industry, but the market and use cases will be, 100-fold larger than what these technologies at the moment are serving, in terms of some young people playing games. So, I mean, of course, a lot of companies have this believe in that and investing in that. And we early on, this started a few years ago, we thought of work environments like as a key, because we've been working obviously on Zoom for 2 years nearly. So to have that more spatialized and see co-location physically connecting up with remote co-location in a continuous space. Some ideas of this. This was some of phygital spaces or cyber urban integration. And when you imagine that our physical spaces become windows and interfaces into virtual worlds rather than just sitting on at home with the headset or with a small laptop. That's the vision with these kind of screens, but also carving caves, 3D VR caves into the fabric was the idea here, and to design together physical and virtual environments. Here, this was the idea of a district of creative industry players, incubation hubs, startup companies, etc. Microsoft Mesh is of course also on that, and the idea what I that you can interface, not only talk and share visuals and you can actually interact with uh, physical artifacts or with information artifacts or actual design artifacts. And for design, that is particularly potent. So I think we as designers, our field, and that is all forms of design, will be the first to really exploit the metaverse and bring on the metaverse for everybody else. That's what I believe. So we've been early on, we had also still during COVID, we had the digital twin of our Beijing office and developed these communication interfaces where you can drop in models in the multi-user thing, sketch on the models, jump into the model, where you can also open screens, not then zoom one, share screen share and get out. It's my turn, but several people sharing screen at the same time and toggle between them, etc. Sketching on this, keeping notes, etc. So these were collaborative tools we've developed, and we've further developed. These are an early stage for that. So I go on. We had done a number of exhibitions, Shanghai, then Beijing, and so what we've done, we've created a digital twin of the whole exhibition. There's a big exhibition in Beijing where you can just go how we've laid it all out there. 80 models are being displayed. They're all digitally twinned, but also in this case, in the digital version, you can go in and explore the model further, in more close up, actually roam and move into the model again collaboratively. Um, so you can see here that metaverse tools are very good substitutes for physical events, particular exhibitions and conferencing. I will come to that. And maybe they're not the real thing, but some aspects are better than the real thing, if you like. And then, but you save a lot of time and energy and cost, not always having to fly around the world to participate. So we've been then working with the company called Metaverse initially. They have been an events company, and so many events company went into kind of metaverse versions, virtual versions. They've been selling private jets. They've used some of our designs to make their conference halls, etc. So we came across them. And they have these wonderful aircrafts. You can roam around, look at them from all sides, go in and look at the seating, look at the features. Then you jump to a table where you can have further discussion, etc. So this worked quite well, and we used them to launch our first metaverse, which was Liberland Metaverse. Right here, Liberland is a new founded city on the Danube. There's some kind of piece of land which was disputed between, or is still disputed between Croatia and Serbia, and so the Free Republic of Liberland was established. They're actually settling with some houseboats and some small structures. And in the meantime, to push that forward, to advance that, enhance that, and build a worldwide digital community around the idea of Liberland, we generated this virtual city, directly on the topography of Liberland, anticipating that Liberland actual construction. It was at the big time of crypto as well, and I'm happy crypto's coming back. But we had, therefore, this was geared towards libertarians, and they overlap strongly with the crypto ecosystem. So there was already a co-location synergy cultural knowledge economy hub specifically tailored for the crypto industry. So we have here the NFT Plaza, DeFi Plaza, City Plaza, and the incubator building, where we had a lot of events. We can roam around and see the city in the background. There are also some exterior spaces. Then we developed all these interactions situations and had a number of events. So we have these conferencing events with one main lecture hall. For instance, Liberland conference, there was two of them took place here, 24 speakers. And then on the side, people had booths, groups had booths, different crypto people and libertarian groups with their own videos. So you can meet people, discuss with people, don't have to sit through all 25 lectures. You can roam around and keep an eye over what happens in the main space. I was presenting as well. And on the bottom left here is our the Metaverse booth you could visit, etc. So I think we had a lot of good results, good participants, met people. So it really showed up this works. And now um, we moved to METROTOPIA, where we're saying, okay, we know so many people in the design ecosystem. We know all the architects, urbanists, industrial designers, furniture designers, interior designers, fashion designers, many more automotive. We have contact to all of these. This is a perfect idea to bring them together in this kind of similarly, some kind of knowledge economy, a collaborative hub. So we have, it's basically the whole community and ecosystem coming together, including fashion brands, automotive. We also have NFTism galleries, so some art institutions, and we made started similarly with this kind of incubator building, but we have expanded this to a whole city, and we started with virtual Venice Biennale, where we also dropped some of these structures on the outside. You can see here contemporary architecture practice, Ali Rahim and Hana and Lava and Su Fujimoto expressed on the outside. This is the urban texture. We're starting to evolve. This was the first synergy cluster. And this is the incubator building we had developed here in the center, and some of the other participants dropping out. So I just show you a few short video for that. This was the first instantiation where we were actually hosted at Metaverse platform, and now we have developed our own proprietary platform based on Unreal Engine, and we actually relaunched this. So we have much more flexibility on developing particular UI UX features, and at our own pace, bringing assets and host events, etc. And you can see here that you have the exhibits both in model form with videos, etc., as well as in full scale. So this was the first kind of video we put out there. You can find that on YouTube. Just describing how we work, what we are building here, and how we can populate our environment. This is all pixel streaming. So we have at the moment about 1,500 invited participants who can come in at any time and roam around. And I will maybe move on from that video. It's gonna be quicker to see. So we have the city is much more dense built up now. We'll come to that later. So you can see here at the bottom, we have actually several city districts. We have the central design district. We've starting to build out. We lots of potential architects and clients, and developers coming in. We have developed about 35 to 40 of our own buildings to create a district only of Zaha Hadid architects. We have Liberland now brought in fully in 3D. Before it was only the incubator building. You can roam around in the whole of the Liberland. And these spaces are all usable for multi-user interaction. So this is the Liberland spaces where they start to have their political kind of meetings, conferences again. Liberland still. And this is Zaha Hadid Architects City with all these buildings in full detail. Often we use very, very detailed models which we have created for in relationship to detailing out for construction, and they're brought in here. This is the design district, so we have invited Ross Lovegrove to design his own kind of floating museum hovering above, close to the incubator building. We'll show that a bit later, as well as bringing a large part of his collection into METROTOPIA. So Ross Lovegrove, one of the top industrial designers with fantastic client lists and beautiful products. We've brought in, fashion and automotive. We'll come to that later. So that building has quite a certain scale where all these exhibits stay together, coincide. We have a main lecture theater. We have semi-underground art galleries. And you can also roam around in the environment to explore. It's still not very densely populated, but when we have events, we always bring in, 30, 40 people, where you can look at things together, discuss, debate, have presentations, and explore the kind of critical density by now of artifacts. So it's really worth a visit. So I'm going to be showing you a few impressions of this lecture I gave on Metaverse urbanism. Some of the images I'll show you later. And then you can have Q&As. This is the NFTism gallery. Kenny Schachter, who's a major art critic, curator, and artist, who had commissioned a number of our pieces as well. You can see floating here. There's also NFT art. You can go in and link directly to even purchase some of those. You can see that here some of the car designs we can kind of do an exploded axis. So the way of presenting artifacts, of course, has its advantages over physical prototypes. And then these are glimpses of the incubator building higher up. So we had Virtual Venice Biennale. We had great architects like Philip Yuan from Tongji. And then you can see from one to the other, there's MAD in the background here. You can look out into the landscape also. Everybody with a description, with a video. The MAD project, Mayan Sung, this is Koop Himbelau, and different ways of presenting there, sweeping a section through. By the way, we have, for instance, a show now planned coming up in the fall in this building. We have that building also in full scale, so we'll bring our whole digital twin exhibition into this, in the right place, in that building, into our metaverse. Theothropolis project, etc. So OMA, we got in Fusujimoto. And again, it's nice to kind of bring in people, show people around, discuss things. This is in studio with the project, so some of them built, some of them unbuilt. In the background is Morphosis, our tower, lava, on and on and on. We also brought in, so you can explore these models as well as going out to the physical. But it's quite nice to have a kind of complex, tight connection with models, videos, etc. And then to have the full scale distributed in the city. There's a piano design we've launched here with Rosie Chan. Zadid Architects have a kind of double height interior architecture and furniture gallery. And we have recently shown a photography competition as well. So we're using the space, and it really substitutes well for the usual internet. I mean, but it also substitutes well for a lot of physical venues. So it will, I think the metaverse take over large parts of the internet and substitute or compete with or augment large parts of the real estate world, or anticipate this as well. So every organization will have virtual spaces, every project will have digital twin anticipation. And so this is Yu Meng Yu, a Chinese fashion designer who is also the head of Central Academy of Fine Arts Fashion Department. And so we had some professors, some conferencing and invited guests. This is the designer interacting, discussing, and then going up and looking at the works and enjoying the works, enjoying video explanations of the works, etc. And again, what's nice, you can always see other things in the background, which you might roam around, and you get these co-location synergies, these kind of sharing of footfall going. That's why I believe that virtual spaces will not and should not be isolated, but be all kind of connected in some kind of city fabric. Of course, the ordering, what's next to what, these are co-location synergies where people find each other and place each other in proximities which make sense to attract end users. So when you roam here around, this is a former student when I was teaching as a GSD, Jack Randler, who's doing his wonderful spacey fractal architectures. You always meet people here, you have something to share with, something to talk about, something to be connected with. It's not a random world. And you obviously avoid teleporting as well as roaming physically. So this is Bellwether Industries, is a uh, drone taxi company. They've launched in METROTOPIA while at the same time launching at Dubai Airfair. And you can see they're quite happy. They don't have a full-scale piece yet. They have a half scale, just showed in Dubai, and they can they're quite satisfied the way the vehicles come across in METROTOPIA. So they obviously get a delicious, well kind of crafted representation which satisfies designer. So this is Ross Lovegrove Gallery. And again, the rendering, real-time rendering of all these reflections and textures is quite amazing. So he designed this gallery where every single surface is reflective. And again, we can have a bit of fun and have something hovering above. We might also have the SpaceX pavilions hovering, which is Tom Kovacs' version of a virtual biennale, which was more graphic based rather than 3D based, but we are collaborating with Tom also in the next iterations. By the way, we also have been now the second time we're coming to the Chicago Architecture Biennale and hosting and exhibiting in relationship to that as well. There's some impressions of the Ross Lovegrove show, and again, you get a nice level of detail, of course, going, and we also talking to many other major industrial designers. So this will be quite sure the go-to place, and somehow we don't have to wait, I believe, for the metaverse to take off globally. We can make it happen as a design ecosystem community. We will be the ones who actually pioneer the whole space, I believe, because it's so compelling. So this is some of impressions of Zaha city. So where we brought in many of our projects, and we kind of composed a city with the kind of CBD district with more kind of block and urban fabric districts, landscapes as well, where we're showing some of our more landscape-based architecture hovering above the city. So I think it's quite impressive, and all of this is in one map. all of this can be seamlessly explored. So it's a relatively large world. And we're working on various forms of navigation. You can fly drones. You can, of course, record event and throw them onto YouTube. So I think it's a very good proposition. We're still in the stage of fundraising. We haven't, there's no general public access yet, only invited guests so far. These were glimpses of cityscapes we can imagine, and we did a whole kind of studio at AA as well about what kind of, because we believe in the virtual city, not only in the virtual space, to bring together these industry-specific co-location clusters, if you like. So that was a studio which we developed. And I mean, we can also go a bit further. I mean, it's tricky. We need to, when we design, it's quite similar to what we're used to in buildings and cities, because that's where we can use our competencies, because the events we kind of hosting are more or less directly the same we might be hosting in physical buildings, conferences and exhibitions in particular, but also collaborative design studio sessions. But we can also imagine that there will be a gradually untethering from the very well understood and known gravity and physics constrained worlds. I guess we would still want to have a certain kind of avatar orientation. I mean, we don't want to be kind of, I can go totally crazy, but gradually I think what will evolve will be kind of emancipation from direct translations of what we might do architecturally in the real world, although we also believe a lot of times we will design physical and virtual space together, and that will be some kind of tethering. But parametrism, I guess, will be makes a lot of sense in terms of the complexity, the maintaining legibility interface complexity, gradients, overlap, interpenetration, all of these features which make parametrism meaningful for the contemporary complex knowledge economy world, but of course continued because we're living in the same kind of functionality world. We will continue to use in the metaverse. So this was a studio where we're saying virtual Bauhaus, let's say schools of design should exist also in METROTOPIA. This is a standalone study. This is a virtual design school hovering above Bedford Square, above the AA in London. And this is AADOL work. I've done 3 sketch designs with students on that topic. We'll see if we can get in here. Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah, now we're going in. This has different disciplines. It has architecture, industrial design, fashion design, different. It has exhibition spaces, collaborative spaces, lecture space, etc. Lobby spaces. So a few impressions of that. Cut that short. Oh. Some of the lecture spaces. We also start to think of 3D archives, 3D collections of furniture, for instance, in buildings and models, and how they could be browsed and navigated. It's in another of those projects. Let me move on. Of course, avatars are important, that we get good representation of ourselves, and so that we can have identities which shift seamlessly between our physical environments and encounters and our digital environments and encounters, as well as overlaying virtual onto real spaces. I mean, scanning technology is wonderful to bring in real space and then overlay back through various projection techniques. And so this is the way this would hover above Bedford Square. It's a 3D scan installation, which was there actually from MTech. And so these technologies are very, I mean, I think technologically we are ready to really have productive and effective use cases. So a scan of the lecture hall at the AA with some of the models we've scanned. And we can also, this way, you can also learn about, this is the DRL studio, scanned with all the kind of these sort of layers of models from the last few years. We have, well, you can discuss and interact with
Hi,
Theo
nice to
Spiropoulos.
meet you. Could you tell me a bit about yourself?
Nice to meet you too. I'm Theodore Spiropoulos. I direct the Architectural Association's Design Research Lab Odell in London and co-founded Minimaforms, an experimental art, architecture, and design practice. My work focuses on innovative approaches to architecture and design, exploring how technology and creativity can intersect to create new experiences. If there's anything else you're curious about, feel free to ask.
So by the way, I have a kind of chatbot with all my writings and interviews, and we have now developed the AIPA connection with ChatGPT or any kind of language model to interface and feed up our agents within our metaverse as well. So we have
But that takes us consciousness as a transmitted. And later it was taken over and they by Hamburg. But that takes us consciousness.
and again, like always, it's been quite productive with collaborating with universities, exploring ideas, bringing ideas of what we're doing in the office, letting students participate.
That was more democratic. That came from Arnak. Came from
And bring in features as well into the metaverse, which we've been trying in the physical world without getting anywhere, like responsive environments, architectural agents, intelligently reconfiguring and setting up and testing scenarios to maximize their utilization. Some of these ideas will, I think, develop first in the metaverse under real use case scenarios, and then we can learn how to design them and eventually bring some of this into the physical world. So I believe that metaverse design will accelerate also and enhance ideas which we can bring in back into the physical environments. This is this idea of a 3D archive, a 3D swarm-like formation of products to select from. We're actually working on that as well in METROTOPIA, as well as at Zadig Architects, our own archive, for instance. So this was an idea of interfacing also with urban environments, a collage of London, Paris, New York to show fashion design, industrial design, and architecture. Some kind of another version of that multidisciplinary design school. And it's the last thing I'll show. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Patrick, for the lecture. Is really inspiring. We have now some time for questions and to initiate the discussion. First of all, I want to say thank you to the four speakers, Andy, Dinah, Penelope, and Patrick. And well, I have a couple of questions about the topic. So, and then we will give to the audience also the opportunity to ask. I have two questions. One is directed to Patrick. I guess I want to take advantage of the opportunity to ask you a question. Because you are the principal of Zaha Hadid Architects, and of course, you have an overview of what it takes to handle such a practice, and not only to create the culture to deliver and produce such a creative environment, but also to deliver architecture and build it. So to what extent do you see Metaverse being central in an architectural practice to all the challenges that it entails in the future? I'll sit down here.
For us, I mean, of course, we're delivering buildings and venues and spaces for many clients, and more we offer and see clients having interest to also be at the same time in the metaverse through a digital twin version or anticipate some of the use cases for their buildings. For me, it's quite seamless on the design side of things in terms of configuring interaction scenarios. I mean, framing social interactions through spaces. That is, and these kind of interactions are more or less the same, where we're substituting whether we're doing it in physical venues or in virtual venues or combined cyber virtual or physical spaces. We're talking about a seamless design agenda. A social functionality criteria are continuous, and the repertoires of articulating this are continuous, where at the moment we're learning in the metaverse and the virtual versions a lot, of course, what we've competencies and understandings of our audiences, but also our own kind of design ideas we're bringing from the physical world into the virtual. But I can see that this also will feed back and enhance our design agendas for the physical. So I think it's a perfect position to be in for a firm to operate across both spaces. I mean, the engineering stack is 100% swapped out. So none of the engineering of the physical world will carry over into the virtual world. We have our own engineering challenges, if you like, in terms of refresh rates and polygon counts and many other aspects where our engineers are maybe epic games, or the interaction coding we have to develop. But the design part is totally seamless. And that's where the way I see it, and a lot of people in the firm see it like this. We have actually several groups working on different aspects. We have actually a Unity-based group, an Unreal Engine-based group. We have Metaverse, METROTOPIA, but we also have these digital twin exhibitions, and we're doing so-called, which I haven't shown here, we've worked with Epic Games and others to develop a participatory urban development platform, where we're using Metaverse to anticipate buildings and have more interaction with end users and composing modular elements, and also having a kind of community building and nearly dating site where you can come together with future tenants, future owners to co-design and co-socialize, etc. So we have several teams working on that. Before COVID, we had our VR team. So we had it was just kind of obviously part of the design visualization. We had some clients, we spoiled them, where they only looked at virtual spaces, not wanting to look at renderings anymore because they can really explore and look at every corner and move from one space to another. So we had some clients where we did, you know, a whole kind of suite and set of presentations only VR based. So so that's why we were well placed to jump on that, and I'm super excited. So this is one of the things I personally get a lot involvement in. So every Monday is dedicated to advancing this on my calendar.
Okay, now I have a question for the three speakers, and it's just to open the debate. This symposium is about pixel to planet, so how XR can connect to the challenge of climate action. And actually in all the presentations, there is the idea, or there is this paradox of either migrate or connect. So sometimes the virtual environments and the storytelling serve us to get away from the challenges of the physical world and to live in a world where we are more free, even we can be more free from gravity, and we can explore our imagination. But this disconnects or migrates us from the challenges we have. But in other presentations, we see how Dinah, particularly you were talking about the capacity of VR to create more empathic and more connected to the issues of the environment. So I think it's a question for debate. Where do you see the technology more as a dystopic paradigm where we will disconnect, or like an utopic paradigm where we will connect?
Shall I jump in on that one? I think it's a choice depending on who's the creator, who's the storyteller, and who the audience is. It can do both, and I think it is it's a continuum from our daily existence, from our current world and our environment, and I think we can choose which it does, and both might be informative and both might be useful. But yeah, it's very much up to the agenda creators, which could be the storytellers, it could be the designers, the researchers. It should be a combination, in my view, but also informed, as I said, by the audience and what they want, or what we think will be useful for the audience to understand.
I mean, I can jump in. Thank you very much both for very inspiring presentations. It was great to listen to. I'm actually really interested in the idea that what we're facing is not either or, but going towards a situation which is a hybrid. And I think that these technologies will be more and more integrated with the physical. When Patrik was talking about the building, the real fabric and its digital counterpart. And I think that there is a need to start thinking about how our experiences in the physical world are actually affecting the way that we design these digital interfaces, and to start reflecting on the boundaries of what constitutes one, and what are the possibilities and challenges in each one. But I think that there are issues there that people trained in architecture with a kind of vast philosophical and historical grounding that we have in our architectural education, how we can actually bring in some more in-depth conversations about ethics, bias, about accessibility in these spaces. And so the storytelling potential and the kind of philosophical potential of these spaces is also something that is really interesting. And actually, Dinah was a visitor in our program only, when was it now? Because I lost track of time, a couple of days ago. And we had this conversation about the Friday. So we had this conversation about how these platforms are not neutral. They're not free space. And I think there is a need to challenge not only the design, but also the facilitators for this design through the software, through the platforms. So I think it's not only how XR and storytelling in these fields will affect architecture, but also how architecture can actually contribute to creating spaces that are fair and ethically responsible and accessible to all. So I guess that's what we're really interested in.
I mean, just want to mention, so I make a distinction between, let's say, and it's important to take note because let's say the technologies we're talking about are coming out of a storytelling and gaming world, video gaming and kind of storytelling and movie making world. And it's quite something different agenda to in a way frame real life productive social interactions rather than kind of storytelling. I mean, when it comes to storytelling, of course, there are two types, which you asked about connecting, disconnecting. I mean, yes, there is something like sometimes storytelling has this kind of escape into fantasy, indulgence in nostalgia, and if it doesn't contribute to making this world, we have to live in a better world. And it's if some people feel, they have to kind of escape, that's in a way sad. But I think for most of us and for most of the maybe more educated people, they feel excited about the real world. And of course, you can use stories, forms of realism, even science fiction to problematize trends and tendencies. And we all need movies and TV series to, update our sensibilities, to mature, to learn, and to cope with life. So that's on the storytelling side, you can make a distinction between escapism and engagement, let's say. And that's, I think, for me, an important distinction. But then again, there's another distinction where you're saying, okay, storytelling, actually, when we're coming into framing real life, then we have some overlap in terms of the semiology, where we're characterizing situations through design, where we make association what belongs together, and we prepare a mood and mode of interaction through the design. So that element maybe carries over as well, but I don't see myself as a storyteller in this way. And oftentimes in architecture, you have clients wanting their building to tell a story. I'm often skeptical about this because the only story the building should tell is about what happens within it, and not some symbolism about something else, something which consumes the space and resources which you actually should use for designing the interaction spaces, and maybe also articulating and revealing the interaction potentials rather than a one-liner kind of story. So this kind of symbolism is a kind of sometimes problematic agenda, and I'm saying that as somebody who's promoting semiology in architecture.
I mean, I wonder if one word that perhaps helps bind or at least make some connections between the presentations is perhaps, I mean, maybe not explicitly storytelling, but world building in a sense. I wonder if even the work that's done by Zaha Hadid architects within the metaverse, there was this discussion that at some point they were virtual surrogates for social life, but then it's also this notion of them as a prototype or prototyping things that could possibly move into the real world, migrate into the real world. I feel that also some of the work that we see in Penelope's unit, there is perhaps a reflection on contemporary issues, but it's done through storytelling, if you like. But there is also somehow a kind of a projective aspect to it as well. It's not simply a reflection, but it's also a projection of what we could possibly do. So I wonder if there is, what's commonly binding across a lot of the work is this notion of world building, maybe not storytelling explicitly, perhaps.
I mean, by the way, I thought I was very impressed with the work Penelop's showing. I only saw the second half, but that was incredibly dense. So congratulations for that. Yes, I would accept the idea of a world building of, I mean, we have clients, ambitious clients, institutions or corporations who want to build something new, something novel, have a new offering, inviting the public to, or maybe their staff to join a new kind of form of life, if you like, to maybe. So that's the sense, world building, projective, and we can do that in the metaverse. We can go a bit further in the metaverse and we have more novelty and more experimental offerings, and we can also quickly adjust them, change them, adapt them if they weren't working. So there's there's less of a burden of being safe and more of a chance to take more risk and allow for more risk taking and degrees of freedom, because you can kind of these are learning environments. Potentially it's not as costly and disruptive to make mistakes, correct mistakes. So that's, I think, a great chance. And I think, since particular the way I'm talking about it, or the way I see us going with this, it will have real potential to bring back for the physical environments, or the interfacing with the physical environment. So we had, we have major clients like Meta itself, for instance, and or other cultural institutions, whether it's a university. You can also imagine a purely online university, which maybe in the end also settles physically. So these are world building efforts, like means architecture in the best sense. And to some extent, yes, there's an element of telling that story of a future potential of a more satisfying life together.
I think,
Dinah.
yeah, I was just going to go back to the framing of story. And I think, personally, I think story is a bit of a limiting term. It's one I use all the time because that's what we have. But I think the commonality between what we're talking about, world building, is it appropriate as a term? But I think it's beyond that. It's actually what we're all talking about is creating change, whether it's changing behavior, whether it's changing perception, some sort of consciousness shift through world building, or through the design work, or through student work, which achieves an outcome. And I feel like that's the sort of area where there's a commonality between these different perspectives on XR, and how XR and the built environment can come together to create change. So I feel like change is, or creating change, or creating impact. And by that, I mean some sort of shift in the user's perspective, because world building could be quite a passive concept. Whereas I think that the key thing here is about this interactive, whether that be fully interactive or perception of interaction. I think that's the unique opportunity here that perhaps is something we can mine further.
Thank you. I have a question. It's primarily for Patrik, but I thought the work of the three of you was fascinating. But I have this pressing question on my mind, and it's more around the aspect of perhaps legislation, curation, what in a way perhaps are the drivers and rules, if you wish, in the metaverse that perhaps enable us to dream harder, and using it perhaps in that provocation David mentioned of being a prompt, if you wish, to perhaps in the future be able to bring it to the real world. What are the kind of whether legislative conditions that drives or prevents us from dreaming harder, even perhaps?
Well, this is a very good question, and I mean, we first thought it through in the case of Liberland, where we were proposing an urbanism as well as a metaverse urbanism as the anticipation of a real urbanism. So in the real world, in the most advanced countries, I think we have, well, I was actually in an all-party parliamentary group on, leveling up infrastructure and housing on two of those, and it is really sad. We have planning paralysis in the advanced countries in England, which generates enormous problem that these explosion in prices and a kind of lack of development, which pushes people into the outskirts and provinces. And so we in the metaverse, obviously we also have the problem and interest in the issue of ordering somehow some overall synergy cluster, and I believe in a lot of degrees of freedom, but also in some level of curation to frame the let's say the self-organization and steer it. So that's an interesting question. So in terms of curated orders, collective self-organizing. So once you have a certain cluster, that those people can collectively set rules for further enhancement. So you don't destroy value, you keep kind of accrue value, and then also free for all zones where you let things be more rough and ready. And maybe in the metaverse, of course, easier you can shift and change, and you can put down an asset and maybe shift and readapt that asset. So you're not so constrained. But we are thinking at the moment, for instance, in urbanism, a cluster of architectural headquarter buildings where we start with something, we're laying out a kind of a zone, and later, and then we invite participants or competitors to come in, and then we'll see how we remain a kind of adaptive curator interface, but we obviously don't want to be overly restrictive. And the current environment in the real world is very, very, very restrictive, of course. That you usually, when you come in, there's kind of pre-allocated land use plans, where somebody has decided where is residential, where is retail, where is office space. They can connect and combine in a single building easily, and you can change your mind and let market or desire and audiences evolve the use mix. All of that is possible, of course, in the metaverse, because we will become legislators of some kind of planning structure. And that's exciting, and we take that role. I mean, originally we would be designers if there was some other metaverse entrepreneur. By the way, METROTOPIA has been co-founded by Saadit Architects with the majority share at the moment, and Arc Agenda is Daniele Gattovici from Chicago. So we doing it. We're both designers, and we're doing it ourselves. We become not only urban planners, but we become kind of municipalities and real estate entrepreneurs. So we are in this sense sitting on the other side of the fence also.
Thank you. I think we are going to open. Penelope, sorry, Penelope, go ahead. Yes.
Maybe just continuing on this conversation, I think that I don't know if it's entirely connected, but through what Patrik was saying and what you perhaps were looking for in your question, I think that there is a blending between categories as well of how we operate in space and how our life is constructed. So this boundaries between entertainment and work, I think, are blending. For instance, all games somehow are based on a model of work. Like you do tasks, you get rewarded for the tasks, and also work becomes gamified. Also then, before, the more traditional fields of cinema and theater were passive receptors of creativity. Now we can enter narratives and interact with narratives. So I think that these categories that we had before about work and entertainment are blending, and there's a possibility of creating new categories of existence in these worlds. And with all the conversations with AI and post-work, I think the whole concept of work might be thrown in the air a bit, and maybe these fields can actually somehow address these sensibilities and these tensions here. I found recently, again, we were discussing it at the Crit on Friday, Kathy Wicks, The Problem with Work is actually really interesting, because she actually says not so much about what will happen after work or post-work, but why do we work in the first place? Like what does work mean? And maybe we need to question that. So yeah, I think that I think this confluence between the physical and the digital and these new technologies throw in the air a lot of really interesting questions about how we navigate a new frontier in the way that we experience space.
Thank you. So I think we are going to open it up to the floor if there are any questions. Yes, come in.
Hi, I'm Jared, a fellow MSD student, and thank you so much for the talk. I have a question more towards the idea of the cinema and architecture bridge and the idea of narrative. And I was wondering, like in a collective sense, what tends to sort of evoke a deeper like response? Is it sort of the symbolic sort of representation of like the intangible aspects, or is it something a bit more grounded in like factual sort of collection of data?
Is that a question for me, I guess, more, or is it for?
Yeah, it can be in a general sense, just
Yeah.
based on like insight, or even just like any feedback from like the students' projects as well.
I think that what we have found is a confluence between accessibility of software that allows you to experience architecture beyond the traditional plan and section, which was very static representational tools. And obviously there is a grafting of an imaginary journey through these means. But by having so accessible a possibility of entering the building and looking at how space unfolds in a kind of narrative manner as a series of episodes, creates an empathetic connection with architecture. And I think that students get really addicted to that experience of embodying a building through experience. I don't know if that makes sense. So storytelling, one could also think that this is not a new thing. In a sense, every temple is a spatial narrative constructed in stone. So I think that there is a connection between storytelling and architecture in that sense that goes back in history. And we find that it's a really interesting way of exploring architectural ideas, but also linking to what we have all grown up through cinema, through narratives that are that we have engaged in a collective unconscious with certain stories. Not only stories, but also there are more cinematographic elements that affect the way that students imagine these spaces. So there are these two cultures coming together, and it's done through this confluence of software that are used both now in architecture, game engines, and in cinema more and more, and video games, which then add the dimension of interactivity. I hope that answers your question.
Can I just add, I mean, I think it's an interesting distinction that you kind of imply between data and facts and and I can't remember actually what your first category was, to be fair, but you were making a distinction between sort of facts and interpretation, what I'd call interpretation, and an artistic kind of, more of an artistic bent, I guess. I mean, from my perspective, I think the facts are great, data is great, but actually if you just present that to your audience, it's pretty dry usually, and it's not very interesting. So it's about interpretation of that, and whether that's interpretation through the built environment, which is absolutely fascinating. And as Penelope says, you know, so many buildings have embedded in them that experience, that human connection, which you can call a narrative or maybe use other terms. But I feel like the opportunity really is with the designers, with the storytellers, to take data, take hard facts and interpret them in a way which brings them home better to your users and to your audiences. So we're acting as a kind of translation device to some extent, but also enhancing and augmenting their own perception. So I think it's a kind of, for me, it's a meeting point between the data, the facts, and the design or interpretation that the creator or the person with the kind of visual or creative kind of vision brings to it. That makes sense.
Thank you all so much. I'm a Master's of Architecture student here at the MSD, and one thing that I think a lot about as a student is how little of the built environment is actually built by architects and kind of taken and uses, you know, urban planners and urban designers. So one thing I was going to ask, kind of a two-part question, is firstly, how can architects be more interdisciplinary looking to the future? And then kind of more secondly and more broadly is how can architects set precedents for the other people in the built environment? So builders, contractors, developers, and kind of all aspects of the built environment be more interdisciplinary with the non-architects. So that could be the, you know, medical doctors, mental health professionals, ecologists, climate scientists, computer scientists, you know, and all these different aspects that we've talked about throughout the day today.
I just want to say, I mean, in the advanced countries, you don't actually have anything going up without the involvement of an architect, professional architect, somebody who's gone through a university education and kind of, so everything which is similarly with any product you'll buy, even including any landscape feature which appears in the city, or so everything of the totality of a phenomenal world is actually created by people who know, who take part in the global contemporary design and architecture discourse. So I don't think that's quite correct. It's more, yes, there are still some vernaculars, perhaps slightly disconnected from the world discourse of architecture, but that's really, you won't find that anymore in the advanced countries. It won't, because actually maybe too much imposed by a kind of legal monopoly to get planning. You can't get planning without an architect. So that means there will always be, and these things are queried, and the planners themselves are part of a discourse. So maybe that's I don't know. So I'm challenging the premise of what you're saying. And of course, then it goes downstream from there. Then, of course, contractors, engineers and contractors, they're just translating in technical terms the social functionality kind of arrangements and expressive arrangements which the architects have put forward. The problem is perhaps that our discipline is rather fragmented, and you have a lot of not everybody is fully clued in, let's say, in the way they maybe should be with the, let's say, global best practice sensibilities which we would want to expect. But that's my feeling. And anyway, I feel when we proselytizing and trying to lead the discipline and advance the resources and competencies of the discipline, we potentially affect every creation which all our populations interface with. And all of that goes through the needle's eye of our discourse. And it's easy to participate in this, at least to be intuitively aware because of all the kind of social media of Dezeen and Archinect and Instagram and so on. And everybody can contribute. You as a student, you can throw up a wonderful project, photorealistically rendered, and it could be fly around and go viral around the internet, and you impact everything which goes on from the next day onwards. That's my take on it.
Yes, Penelope.
Yeah, thanks so very much for the question. Maybe going, taking it from a different point of view. I actually always thought and continue to think that architectural education should be seen as something which is broader and not necessarily leading into making architects that go into the architectural profession, but maybe people that could be involved in politics or become lawyers, a bit like what literature, when studying literature, doesn't necessarily mean that you would become a teacher in a school teaching literature. You might be involved, you might become a lawyer or so I think that architecture as an education is so, it's teaching a way of thinking spatially that can be applied in different professions. And then maybe taking the question that you asked from the other end, somehow I think that these tools that we're using now, going back to what I was saying about going away from the plan and the section, which was a language that only architects were trained into understanding fully. So it was very difficult to communicate an idea of a building to someone that was not really trained in how to decode the plan and section. If you're able now to communicate these ideas through an immersive environment, through VR or through a film, then you can engage an audience in a kind of more immediate way. And I think I watched the previous session where Xavier and I think Martin and from practice, from Hassel and Hazok and de Meuron, were also using this, they had created this world for the builders to be able to enter and view the building in a 3D 360 environment to allow a kind of understanding of what the prospect of the building would be. So I think that there is a lot to be gained on that construction possibility as well, which I think could be much further explored as the technologies advance and become more accessible. I hope that again answers the question in a different way.
Okay, thank you guys very much. From another fellow student of architecture at the faculty, one thing that I find very interesting is the meta building of architecture. But what I wonder, being a student sort of practicing, so many of our design choices are informed by the world around us and simply just the rules of the world around us, such as materials, costs, even coming down to physics and gravity. And sort of, I just want to hear a bit more about what are some of the framework of design when you're creating in a world where we don't have these limitations. So what like informs the design choices and sort of provides clarity in what things look like?
Yeah, so I guess that's addressed to me. Well, the social functionality of architectural design, as well as the other design disciplines, including graphic design, is, for me, it's framing social interaction. So, for instance, the designers of the Zoom interface, they had to use spatial layouts, the grid, the placing of the interaction features to think of them and how they be graphically displayed. So there's an element of interaction design. And that is also, I call it dramaturgy, is also part of architecture. You have to think about what can you actually shift? Where can you open doors, blinds, shift paravents, switch on the lights? So that interaction design is also existing in architecture. To kind of, and how can you gather, here we are gathering in a grid or a list of names. And so the social functionality is pretty similar and the same because we're living in a knowledge economy. What we do usually is we work together, probably on research development, production, as well as social, all sorts of services. And and again, what would you use? You use social functionality criteria. You need to you reflect the legibility of the interaction offerings, and also how they're distributed in space. I call that spatiology. So that they become accessible, that things which belong close to each other are close to each other, which things can be overviewed together. Maybe if you allow too many things to be coming to view at the same time, you get problems of recognizability and of perceptual tractability. That's in complex urban environment. That's also in graphic environments and in virtual environments. And you have the semiological dimension where you have to distinguish, maybe through shape, color, as well as through location, what belongs together and what's the character of the expectation. You can anticipate the social and communicative character of the situations you might enter. You need to make certain boundaries visible. If you cross them, you enter into a new situation. All of these things, and of course, in terms of the metaverse, we're missing a lot of the physical constraints, but we still have to place events, order events in space, make them visible, accessible, even if you use like teleporting. I mean, I would want to avoid as much of these kind of graphic interfaces like scroll down menus, which are cumbersome, or where you have to read and therefore concentrate, but have more of an intuitive navigable environment. Is the same in an airport. When you have to read too many signs, you get lost or you overlook them. All of these concerns will feed into become the criteria of iterating your design and improving your design with respect to what I call broadly social functionality, which has these dimensions: spatiology, meaning proximity, as well as separating. You also sometimes want to separate things, protect things, events from each other, and make, and filter access. All of these things are important. And of course, when we go into the metaverse, we initially, since it's a one-to-one kind of 3D translation in many ways, and we can use nearly the same models and try them out in the virtual and use them, there is this kind of a lot of carryover. It's also to carry over to the whole point of we have all these competencies. We understand when we walk through a city, we recognize things, we can distinguish, we can read the environment, we know how to behave intuitively, where we invited and where which is public, what is private. All of these competencies so will become in, first of all, is nearly in a replica state. Now, I think, but then we will, and that's only a gradual thing, step by step, one feature at a time, you can manipulate, and that's an invitation that hasn't happened much, to make something more novel and different and use the fact that we don't have gravity. For instance, you can make these kind of screens more like swarms of elements, and you can make the elements more transmutatable. You have more kind of transformation. I mean, it's also, but then you also want to attract. I mean, it's the same in graphic design. When Apple has these nice things, when you close a folder, you kind of see it shrinking and going into a certain place. That helps you to remember where it is, and so on and so forth. So these kind of features, so you can learn from architecture, from urban design, from web design and interaction design on the web, and kind of create something new. But you will obviously, and you're untethered, as it were, clearly from the physical. But when you, for instance, represent humans, I think it makes a lot of sense at the moment just replicating ourselves, because we have a gravity. In a sense, we don't want to meet each other flying in space, because we also want to have a front and back still as avatars, because you want to see, you can track where somebody else is looking. So then you can talk about something, or that you're looking at each other. These are things you could kind of reinvent and have ourselves abstract icons floating around, as long as they maybe have that element of, can you appraise if these abstract icons form a group which look at each other or looking away from each other, and whether they're random constellations or whether they're actually gatherings for a purpose. So that's the way you imagine. You can see what are the criteria of designing in the metaverse, and I think and many features will carry forward because they're functioning well in the physical world. So they will also functioning still quite well in the virtual world. But I think gradually we will emancipate ourselves and find our own idioms. It's quite interesting that a lot of these digital tools, like for instance, the conferencing tool or this whole idea of apps on a phone and so on, or how certain websites or social media sites function, they've kind of converged rapidly on very, very standardized formats. And similarly in the built environment. So there is this kind of thing where it's getting very hard to get away from this because people have no patience if it's not exactly what they expected. And it's something you often find. And before this happened, there was an openness and there was many things. And there was even something like internet art where you explore how we could use this new medium. And then in the end, it converges, similar with the movie. If you think about the movie, 90 minutes, credit at the end, introductory melody, the whole idea of music underlying it, close-ups, flashbacks, everything was there in 1930. And very little in the last 100 years have changed. It's only TV series shifted something new. But if you look at a movie, it's a movie, it's 90 minutes, and all the ingredient features were discovered in very, very, very short order of time, like it's 5 years max, and then remain stable. Same with the car, automotive. The car with the four wheels, the trunk, the engine, the steering wheels, every feature, the typology is extremely ultra stable when it comes to this. So this also to be reflected. So I think we can now kind of probably generate the formats and ways of metaverse because and it's similar with the internet, as I said, which basically became the kind of a version of a magazine, with pages and text and image. And anyway, so that's what I find sometimes a bit frustrating, that there is this kind of rapid convergence which obviously has is a learning curve attached to it, which then freezes the space. So, but I think the metaverse, we're in that, we haven't frozen this thing that up. It's all open yet. Let's see who is going to come out with solutions which then everybody else imitates, and we've sealed it.
Yeah, I have one question that it links with what actually Patrik just said. So I'm very agree on the point that if we use this like metaverse digital environment in a way that the physical environment works, it's probably we are continuing repeating the same, not error, but we are limiting ourselves in doing something more because we are looking at the limitation that we have in the physical environment. But what I would, and linking to this idea, so in the physical environment is a palimpsest, basically. So there's a layering of story, layering of building, layer of urban design, and all of these inform the new construction, the new stories, is linked with the community, and these stories are there in the space, so we can access them somehow. Not always, but certain point we can access. And but while in the metaverse, in the digital environment, this at the beginning doesn't really exist. So we are in front of a sort of empty ground, empty space that we reinvent every time. And so my question would be, is this an opportunity, or we have a missing point of creating also that palimpsest in the digital environment? So it exists actually, a palimpsest in the digital environment. And as a second question related to this one, can or we should consider a collision between the different metaverse. So instead of considering them as different world, different places, how, for example, the metaverse from Zati, the metaverse described by the different words from the cinematic architecture, the word, the stories tells through the immersive factual storytelling. Somehow they link together and they create this actual metaverse that is made by different words. Or at a certain point, we're going to lose them as it happens. So Patrik mentioned before the Microsoft Mesh. So Microsoft Mesh was sort of Phoenix that came out from Altspace VR. And Altspace VR was one of the example of a metaverse that ceased to exist. So it completely disappeared. And there was this public event in YouTube where everyone was there looking at the end of the world. So we had the very first online end of the world of the metaverse. So this is the question. So is the metaverse an opportunity to reinvent every time without the need to keep into account this layering of the previous project? Or probably the metaverse need to keep in mind this element as well?
Maybe I could start. It's a really interesting question. But first of all, I think I would say that I think it's misleading to think of a metaverse as one space, because it's not a world as we have experienced it. It's only facilitated through specific software, specific platforms that are commercial products, and their interests lie in making profit. And that cannot really be ignored. It's not a free space. I think that is something that we need to be all aware of, and it's multiple. If anything, I think we're moving into a kind of more feudalist system, and any work that we do in these realms is actually also work for these companies. So I think that we need to be all very aware of this. But I think that there is also a possibility there of reinventing what space might mean, and how our mental capacity to grasp ideas can be expanded by these new technologies when we don't really have these limitations of gravity. What does space mean with this environment? And I think that connecting directly with an already experienced reality is sometimes a limitation as well. And I think that there might need to be a certain level of forgetting of what we already know to be able to access these different ways of thinking in that space. That's why dealing with some of these ideas, the brief for our cinematic and video game architecture program this year is unrealism, and the potential of going against realism to explore this field of what it means to be in a world that the rules have not really properly been set yet, in the knowledge that in order to even start accessing it, you need to use some kind of markers that would allow you to navigate. But more and more, I think that we might actually start developing different capabilities, and that's why it's such an exciting realm to be playing with right now.
I mean, just want to briefly say, I mean, some of kind of palimpsest element will also remain in the metaverse. I mean, once you've started and build up a kind of critical mass, and by the way, I don't feel that we'll have this big fragmentation into totally different separate worlds and islands, and that's not the way I think our world works. We live in a world society, we have world architecture, world cinema, world everything. And if you look at major platforms like X, Facebook, Instagram, etc., you have a kind of connection and interoperability and cross-referencing, and this will be in the metaverse as well. And I think there will be one major metaverse, for instance, for all the design disciplines, which then interoperability links up to maybe into crypto, maybe into other more of a science-based element. They also, of course, have sub-districts. So it will be a continuous texture. Doesn't mean that it's all one proprietary platform. And initially, when we started thinking about the metaverse, we thought about it as a DAO, as part of the whole crypto thing and self-organizing. That has faded a little bit, that aspect. But there's still options and possibilities there. I wouldn't, see that it's right that a lot of these ventures will be for profit, but I'm actually a pro-market, pro-capitalist person, which means that it's just if we don't have crony capitalism and we have a freer, unrestrained form of fully competitive capitalism, we actually this will serve end consumers and all the purposes we're seeking kind of their flourishing within such a world. It will only facilitate that. So I'm very pro. I don't see the profit motive is, if anything, disciplining the flow of resources towards end user satisfaction and, if anything else, and through the competitive force, you generate these wonders of productivity and, let's say, consumer surplus, where profits actually are eroded. Profit only accrues to the innovators for a short period of time and as a reward for pushing to the next level. You can see that at the moment also in the AI space. I mean, it's a wonderful world of dynamism, and which compares so well to this paralysis, which kind of state regulation has covered all the dynamism. Let's say we are making so much productivity gains in the last 15 years, 20 years. It's unimaginable what I can do now by myself compared to what 20 people kind of under my direction was trying to do 20 years ago. Where's it all going? But it doesn't come through because I think there's so much over-regulation and over interference in that world. That's why we don't. And we have robotics, AI, internet, and yet we have per capita productivity gains next to zero over a space of 15 years. It's an absolute tragedy. So as much as the metaverse can escape out of this kind of leaden dead hand of kind of collectivist control, all the better. And you can see that in Europe, because we are over-regulating everything, there's absolutely nothing going on. It's kind of suffocating. So that's my pitch after what was Penelope was just saying. But I think the palimpsest element will be there. So for instance, we're building, it's not costless. You will have the path dependency, what we are building, the platforms, the features, they will be accruing and evolve in a path dependent. It's still open, and eventually, I hope not too soon, will kind of freeze up to some extent, but it will also have to build on what we exist. So we already in METROTOPIA, we recycling, we bringing back Liberland and ZHA City, and the incubator building was recycled, and we are accruing and building complexity. Yes, on the margins we can shift things around, but this is kind of sedimentation and accrual and a blank slate. No, I'm sorry, we're not going to be back on a blank slate. And that has its positive and negative. And of course, there might be new entries are always possible, new market entries where you can kind of start from scratch, but that's tough. And I think it's also the way this lays over the world of built environments and of architecture, which has evolved in the last, let's say, 500 years since Alberti. We will also, there's never a tabula rasa, totally fresh beginning. I find I'm still reading Alberti's works with let's say with benefit, and everything in between. And that will also inform, of course, the way our discourse kind of shapes the metaverse. So this is a kind of deeply sedimented cultural kind of palimpsest, if you like, in this sense, although not physically, but physically you can also kind of You can also kind of wipe out whole city districts if you wanted to. But again, we usually don't want to do that.
I was just going to contribute that I think there's never a tabula rasa in any of these environments, really, because the common element is people, humans. And actually, what the reason for our layering in our physical world is because we desire meaning and reason to exist, to some extent. And I think that will be similar in any metaverse. I think it's important to note, I'm not going to go against a free market's view of the world and say that profitability is a bad thing, but there absolutely are social agendas embedded in some of these people who are currently curating our metaverse worlds, which I do think we need to be very aware of. It's not that I'm saying that they can't make a profit. I absolutely I don't have a problem with that at all, but I do think we need to be very aware of whether those policies by some of the giants in this space are changing what we can say and what we can do and what kind of connections people feel with the space and what connections we can make to give people meaning in the metaverse. So I think it's quite important to be aware of that.
Thank you very much. I think we can safely end on these couple of very poignant notes. So I just wanted to thank all the speakers, and also thank you very much for the compelling conversations that we've had. And the audience as well. Thank you very much. It's about 9 o'clock here or something like that. So thank you for sustaining this. So we'll just, with that, we'll draw to a close for this session and also draw to a close the day of the presentation. Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you.